We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Andrew back on Liberty Nation Radio. I remain your host, Mark Angelides. Very fortunate to have with us Liberty Nation's economics guru and editor, Andrew Moran. Now, Andrew, you came out with a fantastic story on the page of libertynation.com discussing California's job report. And for me, it was a major eye-opener because I keep hearing California, it's the number 5 or number 4, depending on which metrics you use, economy in the world. But then you look at the jobs numbers, and it's a wasteland waiting to happen, isn't it?
Yeah, the headline numbers were astounding. Of course, when we dig deeper, it's even worse than the headline numbers. So anyway, if between September 2023 and September 2024, using Bureau of Labor Statistics data, California added about 250,000 new jobs. However, as usual, there were downward revisions, which have become so prevalent over the last few years. So these updated numbers show that there are actually 76% fewer positions than what was initially reported. So actually, there are only 60,000 new jobs created over that 12-month span.
Andrew, that is a 3-quarter revision.
Yeah, nice.
That's cutting 75%, 76% off the overall total. 2 questions on that. One, how could they get it so wrong? And number 2, what does it mean that an economy the size of California, with the population of California, are only adding 60,000 jobs?
All right. So for your first question, economists have been debating why this has become so ubiquitous over the last few years. How come there's such sizable downward revisions? I've done a few pieces on this. I've spoken to some experts, and a common concern among the data collectors is the response rate, because when you gather the employment data, you have household surveys and you have establishment surveys. They speak to people who live within a household, and then you talk to company owners. You gather insight about the hours worked and how much they're getting paid and how many people you added throughout whatever period the survey period. But the response rate has declined significantly over the last 10 years. I think the last Bureau of Labor Statistics number was about, I think they have a response rate of about 66%, and that's down from about 88% during the Obama years. So that's weighing on the data. So that's one aspect of it. Other ones will present theory saying that they're manipulating the Microsoft Excel spreadsheets to change a few things around.
It can't be that hard to get payroll tax information.
Okay, so that's the second part of it, because if you look at the Philadelphia Fed, they release their national employment benchmark index report every quarter, and they collect all the state payroll data, and that's why they present a greater clarity what's actually happening in the U.S. labor market.
They're taking my advice already before I even said it.
Correct. Yes.
Wow, I'm good at this.
And then the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it also releases its benchmark revisions every year, and it has a comprehensive one also every couple of years. And it typically it uses that payroll state data, and then it revises the numbers. Now, for your second question, okay, so there are 2 things for this. One is that the private sector has erased about 200,000 jobs between September 2022 and April 2024. So you're having fewer companies. Therefore, of course, you can have fewer private sector jobs. On the other hand, you're having a dramatic growth in, guess what? Government jobs. So you're having, the public sector just absorbing all of this. And of course, the public sector doesn't create any value. It doesn't create goods and services. All it does is just absorb and take. So of course, you have a divergence between the growth in the public sector and in the private sector.
Yeah, I feel that you kind of buried the lead in there a little bit, Andrew.
Thanks.
No, sir. But you said, with fewer companies, in California. Well, hang on, that's a big deal, isn't it? So these are the companies that are either closing down because economic turmoil, which I would suspect, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that would be in the minority. But in the majority are companies looking for, let's not say greener pastures, but fairer pastures in terms of where they're not going to get taxed or overregulated, and they're shipping out to redder climes. Is that
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the data and you typically see California at or near the top of the population exodus, and then you see the growth, migrating to, let's say, Texas and Florida. So people are entrepreneurs, small businesses, they're fed up with the high tax rates, the regulatory burden, and of course, the natural disasters that have been unfolding routinely in the Golden State. So there are many factors of why people are fleeing Gavin Nation, or they're sick and tired of Newsomonomics. They don't like that type of economic doctrine that's unfolding.
For those of you listening on radio, you just missed Andrew Moran doing a rather. I'm not entirely sure what he was doing. It was either a medical episode or a dance.
That's what Newsom would do during his podcast. He can dance, move, and jive.
So yes, so what we're seeing an exodus. Well, there's two things, I guess, isn't there? There's expected new companies starting. But rather than getting trapped into California, where there has been talk of exit taxes for companies, so rather than getting trapped in there, they're actually choosing to open up their new outfits, their new ventures in other places. And then, of course, there's the ones that are thinking our bottom line will be better if we go somewhere else, because that can really be the difference between a business succeeding or failing. Because it impacts your bottom line so much, what the regulatory pressures are financially, what the tax burden is. That can, especially for a new startup, that could be the difference between success or destitution.
I think also businesses are typically forward-looking. So if you look at California's fiscal situation, their conditions are deteriorating rapidly. They're constantly running massive deficits. They have tremendous amounts of debt. So of course, eventually when the bills come due, what does the government have to do? It's going to have to start raising taxes, penalize companies, and then eventually, of course, target the wealthy donors. Ironically, targeting the very people who support Governor Gavin Newsom. So the fiscal picture of California is just worsening, and it's not going to improve anytime soon, based on the numbers that we're seeing of everyone just leaving the state.
For those of you familiar with John Carpenter's work, there was the original Escape from New York and the sequel, lesser seen but still highly entertaining because John Carpenter's John Carpenter. Escape from Los Angeles. I think that's spreading to the whole state. Andrew Moran, thank you ever so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.